My son, who had been hiding behind a book, emerged from his hiding spot and looked up at me. "Mum, why do volcanoes erupt?" Cameron inquired. I smiled as I often did, having been accustomed to his never-ending line of questions. As the other 5 children were outside playing, we could usually find him with a book in his hands. He was the only one of the 5. Yet, Cameron, who was just 8 years old, had a big heart. He had a lot of fun cuddling up on the couch with his father, Chris, 41, and myself to watch movies. And whenever he was going through a difficult time, he never hesitated to confide in me about it. Cameron and I could have a conversation about anything. As I went to check on him, I found him dozing off in bed while wearing his elder sister's silky peach panties. I couldn't believe my eyes. He had never even hinted at such a thing before. The next day, I waited to speak to Cameron until all of my younger children, Christopher, age 4, Bradley and Ebony, both age 7, and Chelsea, age 16, were occupied. Christopher is the youngest of my children. The night before, I noticed that you were wearing Chelsea's underpants, so I brought it to your attention. His small face contorted in disgust. He inquired as to whether or not you were upset. To which she said, "Not at all, love." Cameron bent his head as he said, "I just questioned why." He responded by saying, "I want products that are silky and lacy. They don't cause any irritation when they touch my skin." I laughed, gave him a hug, and reassured him that everything was going to be well. But I cautioned him against wearing his sister's underpants in case she got mad about it. He pleaded with me not to tell anyone, and I promised him that we would keep our discovery to ourselves and his father. Later that evening, Chris and I talked about it, and we came to the conclusion that he was most likely just experimenting. Cameron was too young to fully understand what it meant to wear underwear designed for women. On the other hand, a few months later, he presented me with a letter. He gave his mother the instruction to read this later when no one else is present. After putting the children to bed that night, I went ahead and read the letter. It stated that I had a strong desire to put on some girls' jeans. It would be nice to have some, but I don't want to be stuck wearing them constantly. I was conscious of the fact that ignoring the problem was not an option for me. It was obvious that he had given it a great deal of thought. The following day, Cameron and I had a scheduled appointment with Chris. "Do you place a high value on this particular item?" I queried. A little nod of the head was given by him. He stated, "I enjoy the way they are to touch." After that, he shifted his attention to face me. He asked, "Will you fetch me some, Mum?" That question was one that I had been dreading to hear. We assured him that he would give it some thought. I had no doubt in my mind that he would get over that stage. Yet, I was worried that stealing hers would spark a dispute within the family in the meantime. In the end, despite the fact that it was a challenging decision, I went to Asda and bought him a box containing 3 pairs of silky underwear. His eyes shone with excitement as I handed them to him later that evening. I told her that the only place she could wear them was inside the house. In my opinion, no one else should have been aware of what he was up to at that time. Cameron will only put these on when he is in bed and will wear them below his pajamas. Mum, I'll be sure to let you know once I've donned them. Cameron honored his commitment to tell me that he was donning knickers on the night of every month while I was tucking him into bed. The following day, after washing and drying them, I would place them in his drawer. Cameron proceeded with his day as usual in most respects. As he got older, he started to exhibit a higher level of interest in females. When Chelsea had friends around, he would hang around and flirt with them in his own cheeky way. He would linger out when she had her friends over. Even at that young age of 10, Cameron already had a girlfriend. They spent Valentine's Day together, and he showed his affection by giving her a card and a token of his affection in the form of a tiny present. Nevertheless, he came to see me and we had a conversation in February of this year. Cameron made the following remark: "I'd like to know what it's like to wear cosmetics." I took a full breath in. I told him, When you are older, you'll have to make a decision on anything like that. Cameron just stated, "Okay, Mom, as of right now." Nevertheless, a few days later, he surprised us when he added, "South Wells is witnessing a lot of young people taking their own lives. Mom, do you know why they did that?" I responded with a word of caution. "I'm not sure. It was unhealthy for a child of that age to be so interested in something that was so horrible." During the time that Chelsea was away for the weekend, we gave him permission to use the Xbox and stay in Chelsea's larger room. Around 11 o'clock, I entered the room stealthily in order to turn off the television and the light. I leaned close to him and murmured, "Night night, love you." Despite this, I found out shortly after 3 o'clock in the morning that Cameron's TV was still on. "Little monkey," I whispered. He has rebooted it, and he is currently falling asleep while watching it on his screen. As soon as I walked into the room, I had the impression that I saw his dressing gown hanging in the window, partially obscured by the curtains. When I turned around to face the bed, I saw that Cameron wasn't there anymore. As I got closer to the window, I brushed my hand casually on the dressing gown. It was at that moment that I realized Cameron was in the room. He was dangling from the curtain rod in this position. I found myself yelling, "Chris," without even thinking. Instantaneously, he appeared in the space. When he got there, Cameron was being strangled by a belt, and he picked him up and helped him to his feet. Cameron was then placed on the ground as the item was removed from him. His frail little body was trembling and going blue all over. "No," I let out a scream. "We must support him." I snatched my phone from my pocket and dialed 999 in a hurry. While we waited for the ambulance to arrive, after receiving instructions from the operator, Chris attempted to perform chest compressions. Cameron was the subject of attention by medical staff at the hospital for a period of half an hour prior to the arrival of a physician. He had left. At that split second, everything in my world came crumbling down around me. I finally collapsed and landed in Chris's arms. I screamed out, "How could this possibly take place? It made no sense at all." At the time, Cameron had just turned into a toddler. While still holding his hands, I gave Cameron a peck on the cheek. I did my best to hold back the tears as I spoke the words, "Mummy and Daddy love you very much." We struggled to make it through the subsequent few days because we were so overtaken with grief at what had happened. Trying to come to terms with what Cameron had done was difficult. I have a hard time accepting that he took his own life, despite the fact that the coroner found suicide to be the cause of death. On the evening before he passed away, he was full of happiness. It was hard for me to believe that he would be bothered by the prospect of dressing in women's underpants and applying makeup. The children start crying when they consider the possibility that they would never see their brother again. I have never been able to get through a day without breaking down in tears. We are all going through a terrible time of mourning Cameron, and I'm not sure any of us will ever be able to get over the anguish of losing him. In 2007, more than 4,000 youngsters younger than 14 years old made at least one suicide attempt. In the UK, between 600 and 800 young people take their own lives each year, making suicide the cause of death for around 1/4 of all juvenile deaths. Papyrus is a nationwide group that seeks to prevent suicide among young people. Its chair, Ann Perry, says that every parent should be concerned about suicidal behavior in their children. Several factors contribute to the decision to end a young person's life through suicide. Sensitivity, an inability to take criticism, and impulsivity are all traits that are associated with youngsters who are at a greater risk of developing problematic behaviors. They typically strive for the highest standards. It is crucial to have strong communication in order to help them. Being emotionally unstable is one of the early warning signs that may be present.